think you can talk to me like that? Ryan Mitchell's voice cut through the garage like a blade. He's 24 years old, built like a fighter, trained like one too. And he had never once in his life been told no by someone who meant it. Carter didn't raise her voice. She didn't step back. She just looked at him with eyes that had seen things he couldn't imagine and said, quietly, everyone, like she was offering him a gift he didn't deserve. Anyway, walk while you still have the chance. Ryan laughed. It's his first mistake. If this story already has you leaning forward, you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to this channel and follow every part of this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from to see how far this story travels. Emily Carter had a way of disappearing inside a crowd, even when she was the only person in the room worth watching. She was 41 years old, with calloused hands and a quiet manner that people in Red Valley, Montana had spent years misreading as timidity. She ran a motorcycle repair garage out of a converted wooden structure behind her house on the edge of town, the kind of place that smelled like oil and iron and honest work. The sign was small. Her prices were fair. Her reputation among the people who actually mattered was something else entirely. In a town like Red Valley, reputation only counted for what the loudest people said it counted for. And the loudest people in Red Valley had never paid much attention to Emily Carter. Wake up every morning before the sun finished rising. She had coffee standing up at her workbench, never sitting. The way she'd always done it, a habit left over from years when sitting down meant losing focus. She pulled on her work clothes, which were plain and practical and permanently stained in ways that soap had long since given up on. Opened the garage door from the inside by hand rather than using the electric lift, because the motor had been broken for 6 weeks and she kept forgetting to order the part. She was not a woman who needed things to be easy. She had never been that kind of woman. Teenage assistant, Noah, at 7:15 every morning on his bicycle, locking it to the side fence the way he always did. He went slightly crooked because the kickstand was bent. Noah was 16, pale thin. He went with a serious face that made him look older than he was when he concentrated, and much younger than he was when something surprised him. He'd been working with Emily for almost a year. He showed up on time, he asked good questions, and he never once complained about the hours. In a town full of young men who thought hard work was something that happened to other people, Noah was different. He had noticed that about him immediately. That morning started, like every other morning, was underneath a 1,978 shovelhead that belonged to a retired schoolteacher named Mr., trying to diagnose a carburetor problem that had been giving him trouble since spring. Noah was at the parts table, sorting through a box of hardware they'd received the day before, checking each piece against a printed inventory list with the kind of methodical focus that Emily had spent months teaching him. Me to organize these by thread size or by application? Noah asked, holding up a bolt. Size, Emily said, without looking up from the undercarriage. Application changes depending on the bike. Thread size doesn't lie. Noah nodded and went back to work. That was how their conversations usually went. Short, functional. But underneath the shortness, there was a language they'd developed, a kind of shorthand built out of trust and repetition. Didn't explain things twice. Noah didn't ask twice. For 2 hours, nothing happened except work. Then Ryan Mitchell drove his truck through the front fence. It was not an accident in the way that accidents usually are, a moment of inattention. A split second where something went wrong. Had been driving fast on a road where no one drove fast, taking a corner that anyone with experience knew required slowing down. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't distracted by his phone. He was simply the kind of person who had spent 24 years living in a world where consequences were something that happened to other people. And that kind of living eventually catches up with everything around you. The truck's front right corner took out 4 feet of wooden fence, a rack of helmets Emily had lined up for display, and clipped rear end of a 1,965 Electra Glide that Emily had spent 11 months restoring for a collector in Billings. It didn't fall. It spun on its center stand and rocked violently before settling, but the rear took the impact directly, and the damage was immediately visible. Thing lasted about 3 seconds. The sound of it lasted longer in Emily's memory. From under the shovel head before the dust settled. Moving quickly but not running. Moving quickly, running. Wiping her hands on a shop rag out of habit as she came through the garage door. She assessed the fence, helmets, one, and then the electroglide in about 4 seconds. Her face during those 4 seconds was completely unreadable. Was already standing outside, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. On climbed out of his truck. He was physically impressive in the way that young men who train obsessively tend to be broad shoulders, thick through the neck, the kind of posture that comes from years of competition. He was wearing a fitted shirt and dark jeans, and he had the easy confidence of someone who had been told his whole life that his physical presence was the most important thing about him. He looked at the fence. He looked at the bike. He looked at Emily. He did not say he was sorry. "How bad is it?" he asked, in a tone that suggested he was asking about a minor inconvenience rather than 11 months of someone else's work. Walked to the electroglide first. She crouched and examined the rear fender carefully, running her hand along the crumpled metal. She stood up. "The fender is going to need to be replaced," she said. "Original matching parts for a 1965 are not easy to find. The light assembly is cracked. The chrome trim on the left side is bent past the point of repair." She paused. "Is worth $42,000. The damage to the fender and light assembly alone is going to be between $4,000 and $6,000, depending on what we can source." And blinked. $4,000 to $6,000. That's a conservative estimate. He let out a short breath. That was almost a laugh. "Look, I'll pay for the fender. But I'm not paying some inflated number because you're counting labor on a bike that was probably already damaged." Lee looked at him. Just looked at him. The way a person looks at something they are trying to understand. "Your bike was not damaged," she said. "I restored it to museum condition over 11 months. I have documentation, photographs, and an independent appraisal from Billings dated 3 weeks ago." "Great," Ryan said, "but I'm not signing anything right now. Give me your insurance information and I'll have my father's lawyer look at it." "Insurance information," Emily said. "Not mine. He hit my property." "I know what happened," Ryan said, his voice tightening slightly. "Telling you how this is going to work." That was the first moment Noah noticed it, the shift in Ryan's posture. The way he straightened up slightly, the way his chin came forward. Subtle, but it was there. And it was the posture of a person who had used his size to reshape conversations before. He noticed it too. "I need your insurance information," she said again, her voice exactly as calm as it had been the first time. "License. This is a legal requirement, regardless of how you want to handle it afterward." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You know who my father is?" "I know who your father is," Emily said. "I still need your insurance information." "Bill Mitchell," Ryan said, and he let the name sit there, like he expected it to do something. Like he expected Emily to change expressions, or soften, or take a step back. Mitchell. Daniel Mitchell was the largest commercial landowner in the county. He had his name on 2 buildings in town and a wing of the hospital in Garrison Valley. Saying Daniel Mitchell's name in an argument was generally enough to end the argument. Said nothing. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Ryan had never experienced that silence before, the silence of someone who had heard what he said and simply wasn't moved by it. He didn't know what to do with it. And not knowing what to do with something, for Ryan Mitchell, had always converted very quickly into anger. "I think you can talk to me like that," he said. And Emily Carter looked at him the way you look at someone who has just made a mistake they don't yet understand is a mistake, and she said, "Way while you still have the chance." Noah felt something move through the air. Ryan laughed. It was a short, dismissive laugh, the kind designed to communicate that he was not threatened, that he was in fact amused by the entire situation. "Walk away," he repeated it like it was a joke. "I'm going to call my father." And by tomorrow, this place is going to be on the wrong side of a zoning complaint and a safety inspection. Does that sound? How does that sound? It sounds like you're going to make things significantly worse for yourself, Emily said. And make things worse for myself. Another laugh, sharper this time. He took a step forward, not threatening exactly, but not casual either. I have a black belt. I've won 3 state competitions. I really want to find out how this ends. Emily did not move. I'm not going to fight you, she said. I don't need to. You know you'd lose. Because fighting, you would waste time I don't have, Emily said. I'm going to ask you one more time for your insurance information. That, I'm going to call my attorney. Ryan turned to look at Noah, who was standing about 6 feet away with his arms at his sides and his face very still. Kid, Ryan said, your boss is going to get you both in trouble here. He's not in trouble, Noah said quietly. Not yet, Ryan said. And this was the moment that changed everything. Ryan moved toward Emily, toward Noah. Quick movement, a shove, the kind of casual physical assertion that dominant people use to demonstrate hierarchy without technically crossing into assault. That Noah was 16 and slight, not expecting it. When Ryan's palm connected with his shoulder, Noah went sideways and down, hitting the concrete apron of the garage with his shoulder and his hip. The sound of it, that specific, hard sound of a teenager hitting concrete, did something to the temperature of the air. He was moving before Noah finished landing. She was between Ryan and Noah, in 2 steps, facing Ryan, and something had changed in her expression. Not fear. Something quieter and more definitive than either of those things. Something that people who have spent real time in real dangerous situations eventually develop, a kind of absolute clarity that comes when someone decides that a line has been crossed and there will be no negotiation about what comes next. Touch him again, she said. Her voice was low, not shaking, just absolutely certain. Ryan held her gaze for 3 seconds. 4, 5. And in those 5 seconds, something moved across his face that he would have been furious to have anyone identify out loud, because it was not confidence. It was the first thin edge of uncertainty, the recognition, everyone, below the part of him that ran his mouth, his weight around, and through his weight, everyone, that he had just done something he couldn't undo. Everyone, and that the woman standing in front of him was not reacting the way she was supposed to react. Done here, Ryan said finally. My lawyer will be in touch. He got back in his truck. He left. Emily stood where she was for a moment, then turned and went to Noah, who was already trying to get up. She said, kneeling beside him, let me look at your shoulder. Fine, Noah said. You might be, Emily said. Look first. His shoulder was starting to swell. Not dislocated, but the impact had done something, and Emily could tell from the way Noah held his arm that it hurt more than he was letting on. He sat him down. On an overturned crate inside the garage, got him ice from the cooler they kept for long work days, and put it against his shoulder without making a production of it. What are you going to do? Noah asked. Document everything, Emily said. She was already moving through the garage, pulling out her phone, taking photographs of the fence, the bike, the tire marks from Ryan's truck, the position of the scattered helmets. He moved through it systematically, methodically, the way a person moves through a process they have run before. I'm going to document the bike damage. Document your injury. You get statements from anyone who saw what happened. And then I'm going to call an attorney. His father is Daniel Mitchell, Noah said. I know who his father is, and he has a lot of pull in this town. I know that too. Watched her work. Does that scare you? Emily paused for just a moment, not because she was thinking about whether she was scared, but because she was deciding whether the question deserved a serious answer. She decided it did. No, she said, it used to. A long time ago, different situation. Not anymore. She went back to taking photographs. By noon, 3 things had happened. First, Emily had reached her attorney, a woman named Sandra Chen, who practiced out of Garrison, and who had handled 2 previous situations for Emily's situations that, in both cases, those zeros had been resolved in Emily's favor before they ever reached a courtroom. Experienced, unimpressed by money, and had a particular professional dislike for people who used their family names as weapons. She listened to what Emily told her and asked four specific questions, and then said, everything. Send me everything you have. File a preservation letter by end of business today. Second, Noah's mother had arrived at the garage and seen her son's arm in a makeshift sling, and spent approximately 90 seconds absorbing the information before announcing, in a voice that was very controlled in the way that voices get controlled when someone is very angry, that she was going to contact her own insurance company, her own doctor, and the county sheriff's non-emergency line. It's in that order. Some word got around. Red Valley was small enough that word always got around. Mid-afternoon, the version of events that being discussed at the hardware store and the diner and the post office was already slightly different from what had actually happened. Expanded in some places, compressed in others, but the core of it was intact. Mitchell. And Mitchell's son in driven Emily Carter's garage, an expensive bike, shoved a teenage kid, and then driven away without giving his insurance information. People had opinions about this. The opinions divided roughly along lines that Emily could have predicted. People who said Ryan was young and it was an accident. And Daniel Mitchell did a lot of good for the community. And weren't people a little too quick to make a federal case out of everything these days? People who said the boy shoved a 16-year-old kid, and that was the only fact that mattered. He did not participate in either conversation. She finished documenting the damage. She arranged for a trusted colleague to come and assess the Electroglide professionally, so she had an independent evaluation on record. She iced Noah's shoulder twice more through the afternoon and sent him home at 3 with his mother, telling him to get a medical evaluation, even if it seemed like he was fine, because documentation of physical injury was important, and she wanted it on record. She sat alone in the garage for a while, not brooding, not strategizing, just sitting with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, in the quiet that she had spent years learning how to find inside of difficulty. Been in worse situations than this. She had been in situations than this. She had been in situations where the person on the other side had resources that made Daniel Mitchell look like a local councilman. She had survived those situations not by fighting harder than the other person, not by being louder, not by having more money, but by being more patient, being more careful, by understanding in a way that people who had never been truly tested didn't understand. That power wasn't something you demonstrated, something you revealed, slowly at exactly the right moment. She thought about Ryan's face when she had looked at him after he shoved Noah. She thought about the 5 seconds of silence where something had moved through his certainty like a crack through ice. Felt something in that moment. She was sure of it. He hadn't known what it was, and he had covered it immediately with the only language he knew: aggression. Then dismissal, a performance of confidence. It had been there. She picked up her phone and typed a message. Short, 7 words. Be aware. Something is coming. She sent it to 6 contacts. Just 6. The contacts didn't have names attached in the conventional sense. They had identifiers that meant something to her and to the people who received them, but that meant nothing to anyone else who might ever look at her phone. She set the phone face down on the workbench. She finished her cold coffee. She picked up her tools and went back to Shovelhead because Mr. Graves needed his carburetor fixed. And because keeping her word to people who depended on her was not something she allowed external problems to interrupt. Miles away, in the living room of a house that said everything a house could say is about the kind of money that had been accumulating for 3 generations, Ryan Mitchell was standing in front of his father. Mitchell was 63 years old, trim and sharp-eyed, with the unhurried manner of a man who had long since stopped needing to prove anything to anyone. He listened to his son's account of the afternoon, listened completely, without interrupting, and then he was quiet for a long moment. Shoved a teenager, he said. He was in the way. He is 16 years old. I didn't hurt him. That's not the same thing as saying you were right. Daniel turned to look out the window. You know about Emily Carter? Ryan shrugged. He's a mechanic. She has a garage. That's all you know. all there is to know. Daniel was quiet again. He had a habit of being quiet in ways that made people in the room understand. They had just said something incorrect without him having to say so directly, had grown up with that habit and had never once stopped finding it unsettling. Daniel said finally, in the context of people I have done business with, and in the context of situations I have watched play out over the years, she is not what she appears. She's a mechanic. She is a mechanic who is also something else. I know exactly what. But I have seen her name come up in situations where names like hers don't typically come up, and the situation's always resolved in her favor. Through luck, not through money. He paused. Through connections. And crossed his arms. What kind of connections? The kind that don't advertise themselves, Daniel said. The kind you find out about too late if you're not careful. He turned from the window and looked at his son directly. He wants you to contact her attorney tomorrow. Make a reasonable settlement offer for the damage to the motorcycle. Apologize to the boy. I'm not going to apologize to some kid because he fell down. You're going to apologize, guys. Then Daniel said, because it is the right thing to do. He didn't. And then because the alternative is a legal proceeding that will be public and time-consuming and will cost significantly more than the settlement. Because I am telling you to. Ryan stared at his father. You don't know anything about her, he said. She's trying to intimidate you from 40 miles away. She hasn't contacted me. Daniel said, she hasn't said a word to me. Is what actually concerns me. Ryan drove home on roads he took too fast, the way he always did, feeling the particular kind of anger that comes from being told to back down from something you haven't figured out is over your head yet. When he called Marcus from his car, Webb was his closest training partner. When 27 years old, one quieter than Ryan in most situations, one and more perceptive in all of them. They had trained together for 4 years. Marcus was the person Ryan trusted with things he wouldn't say to anyone else, which made Marcus's voice the one he most needed to hear when he was angry and needed someone to agree with him. Did not agree with him. Your dad's right, Marcus said after Ryan finished. I don't need you to side with my father. I'm not siding with anyone. I'm telling you what I'm hearing. Marcus paused. You pushed a kid, Ryan. One's 16 years old. That's the fact. Everyone in that town is carrying around right now. Everything else, the truck, the bike, the money argument, and all of that becomes background noise the second people. Here you put your hands on a teenager, standing in my way. He was standing in a parking lot at his job, Marcus said. I know you. Look, I know you. I know when you get in your head about something and you stop seeing it clearly. You're there right now. The woman didn't threaten you. You call the police while you were there. She didn't post anything. She just started documenting. Ryan was quiet. That's not what scared people do, Marcus said. People react. They make noise. They try to get ahead of it. She's not scared, which means she's not trying to get ahead of anything. She already is ahead of it. I'm saying you should find out who she actually is before you decide you're smarter than her. Ryan ended the call. He sat in his driveway for a while, off. In the dark, the particular feeling that comes when someone has told you a truth you weren't prepared to receive, and your body hasn't figured out yet what to do with it. He thought about the moment in the garage when he'd looked at Emily Carter after shoving Noah, and she'd looked back at him, and something had happened in the air between them that he still couldn't quite name. He had felt for just a second like he was looking at the surface of something that went very deep. Quiet in her face wasn't emptiness, but weight, the weight of accumulated experience that he simply didn't have access to. When he pushed the feeling away, he went inside. He told himself the feeling was wrong. He was going to regret that. Back in the garage, as the last of the daylight faded and the temperature dropped the way it does in Montana. At the edge of summer, Emily was finishing up on the shovelhead. She wiped her hands, capped her tools, and stood in the quiet of the garage for a moment. On her workbench, her phone had been face down since she'd sent the message. Picked it up. All 6 cats had replied. Each reply was different. 2 words. One was a number, one was a question. But the common thread in all of them The thing underneath all 6 messages, regardless of how they were phrased, was the same single note: listening. Emily set the phone down. She turned off the garage lights. She locked the door. And then she walked back toward her house in the dark, through a town that thought it knew her. Past neighbors who saw a mechanic and nothing more. A sky that was the specific deep blue of late summer in Montana, being something she had carried for a long time without anyone in Red Valley ever knowing it was there. The town motorcycle festival was 3 weeks away. She had time. But the thing about situations that start moving, real situations, the kind that involve real stakes, is that they don't wait for you to be ready. Develop their own momentum. They pull people into positions they didn't plan to occupy. Reveal things that were always there, but that only become visible under pressure. Lee Carter had learned that a long time ago. She had also learned what to do about it. She went inside, made a simple dinner, and went to bed at 10:30. And somewhere in the dark, the county, 6 phones were quiet, but 6 people were thinking. Decided one, and beginning slowly to move. The morning after Ryan Mitchell drove his truck into her fence, Emily Carter did what she always did when something tried to knock her sideways. She worked not because she was avoiding the situation, because she was pretending it hadn't happened, because work was the thing that kept her thinking clearly. And she needed to think clearly right now, more than she needed to feel anything about what had occurred the day before. It was under the shovelhead again by 6:45, and Noah's empty workstation across the garage was the only thing in the room that made her pause just for a second, just long enough to register it before she went back to the carburetor. He called at 8. "Doctor, she says it's a deep tissue bruise," he said. His voice was trying to sound casual and not quite getting there. "Potato fracture. I have to keep the arm rested for a week," Emily said. "That's the medical documentation we need. Your mother, get a written report." She got everything. "She's pretty angry, Emily. She has the right to be." A short silence. Then, "How are you doing?" Emily considered the question the way she considered all questions, straight on, without decoration. "Functioning," she said, "which is what I need to be right now. He's going to try to make this go away," Noah said. "His father has." "I know what his father has," Emily said. "Home today. Rest your shoulder. I'll be in touch." She set the phone down and went back to work. Sandra Chen called at 9:15, which was early for a lawyer, and told Emily everything she needed to know about how seriously Sandra was taking this. The accusation letter went out last night, Sandra said. "We've also filed an initial incident report with the county. Now I want to talk to you about something before this gets moving." Talk. "Daniel Mitchell's office called my office this morning. 42 a.m. Sandra let that land. They want to discuss a settlement. They used the word reasonable 4 times in a 3-minute conversation, which usually means they're scared of something, and they want to find out how cheaply they can make it go away." He said nothing. "My recommendation," Sandra continued, "is that we do not respond quickly. Responses. Tell the other side you want this resolved. You want them to believe, for now, is that we are in no particular hurry," Emily said. "I know, but they don't know that yet. I wonder for a few days." A pause. "Emily, the boy's injury changes this significantly. The damaged motorcycle is a property dispute. A 16-year-old with a documented to shoulder injury from being physically shoved by a 24-year-old with a black belt in a combat sport is a different category of problem. And I know what it is. I want to make sure you know what leverage you have," Sandra said, "because I think they know. I think that's why they called at 7:42 in the morning." Emily got off the phone and stood for a moment with her hand on the shovelhead's engine block, feeling the cold metal under her palm. She wasn't thinking about leverage. She was thinking about Noah's voice, that particular quality in it when he tried to sound casual and failed, and about the sound he'd made when he hit the concrete, one which she could still hear very precisely in her memory and suspected she would be able to hear for some time. Physical intimidation against someone half your size, against a kid who showed up every morning on a bicycle with a bent kickstand and asked smart questions and never complained. The thing Emily Carter did not forgive easily. Not the damaged motorcycle, not the arrogance, not even the threat about the zoning inspection, which had been so transparent in its smallness that it had almost been sad. Shove. The specific casual cruelty of using your body against someone who couldn't match you, just to demonstrate that you could. So she had seen that before. She had seen it in context far more dangerous than a small-town garage dispute. One. And she had learned not in Red Valley, not in any comfortable place, that the people who used their size that way did it because it had always worked, because nobody had ever stood in front of them and made it stop working. She picked up her tools. She went back to the carburetor, and she thought about what the next 3 weeks were going to require of her. Ryan Mitchell, meanwhile, was discovering what it felt like to be the subject of a conversation he wasn't part of. He showed up at the training gym at 10, which was his normal schedule, and he could feel the shift the moment he walked in. Nothing anyone would have pointed to if he'd asked. The gym had its own social atmosphere, its own internal weather system, and Ryan had spent enough years there to read it the way you read a room you know well. People who usually greeted him didn't. A conversation near the heavy bags stopped when he passed. This was in the corner, working pad, combinations with someone else, and he glanced over once and then went back to his work without the usual acknowledgement. Ryan changed and warmed up and told himself he was imagining it. He was not imagining it. After 40 minutes, Marcus came and sat beside him on the bench near the water station, and his expression had the careful neutrality of someone who was choosing their words. People are talking, Marcus said. Let them. It's not going away, Ryan. The kid's injury is getting around. Ryan worked a hand wrap tighter. A shove. He tripped. Listen, he's 16, Marcus said, and his voice stayed even, which was somehow worse than if he'd raised it. For a living after school in a garage. He didn't say anything to you. He's just there. He paused. You know what people are saying? They're not talking about the bike. They're talking about that. The bike is the actual legal issue. And I also know that legal issues and the way people see you are 2 different problems. And right now you have both. Marcus looked at him directly. Did you look into her? Ryan's jaw tightened. There's nothing to look into. She's a local mechanic. I made a few calls, Marcus said. And his tone stopped Ryan from responding quickly. Kind of calls. I know a guy who rides regional circuit. He's been around for a long time. Knows a lot of people in the community. Marcus paused again. And in that pause, there was something that took shape gradually. Like a photograph, he went quiet when I mentioned her name. And this is not a man who goes quiet easily. He said to be careful. That's it? Be careful? Twice, Marcus said, and then he changed the subject. Ryan stared at the floor. Sound in the gym, the rhythmic impact of gloves on bags, the shuffling footwork, the occasional instruction called across the space continued around him, and he sat inside it, feeling something he rarely felt in this building. He felt small, not physically, not in any way he could have named in a conversation without sounding weak, but somewhere in the part of him that existed below the black belt and the competition record and the family name, somewhere in the functional, honest part, he felt the first real edges of doubt. You know about the Hells Angels? Marcus asked. The question came out of nowhere and landed hard. Ryan looked up. Just tell me what you know. They're a motorcycle club. Chapters everywhere. They're not exactly a community organization. Ryan narrowed his eyes. You asking me about the Hells Angels? The guy I called, Marcus said slowly. He went quiet. He said one other thing. He looked at Ryan with an expression that was not quite concern and not quite fear, but something in the territory between them. He said the woman in Red Valley with the garage, he said, she has friends that nobody local would know about. He said she's been around long enough that she's earned some serious respect. And he said respect in that world, Marcus paused, doesn't come cheap. When Ryan opened his mouth, closed it. You're saying she has connections too. I'm saying I don't know what she has, Marks. I'm saying someone who's been around a long time told me to be careful twice and then stopped talking. And I think you should take that seriously. Ryan stood up. He didn't want to have this conversation anymore. Not because Marcus was wrong. Some part of him was starting to suspect. Marcus was very right, but because absorbing it meant accepting that he had walked into something without knowing what it was, and that the certainty he'd felt standing in that garage yesterday was built on nothing. "I'll handle it," he said. "How?" Ryan didn't answer. He went back to training, but the session was bad. He was distracted, and he knew it. And when you're distracted in a combat sport, everything falls apart. The timing, the reading of angles, the transition. He got caught twice in positions he should never have been caught in. His training partner, a younger guy named Caleb, who idolized him slightly too much, but didn't say anything, which almost made it worse. In the session, Ryan sat alone in the locker room longer than he needed to. Pulled out his phone and searched Emily Carter's name. Nothing useful came up. A basic business listing for the garage. An old community newsletter mentioned about a motorcycle restoration donated to a charity auction 3 years ago. Quote in a local paper about engine maintenance tips for winter riding. Nothing that explained what Marcus's contact had felt when he heard her name. That absence of information was, in its own way, more unsettling than whatever he might have found. About people who had something to hide was that they hid it badly. They had a digital footprint that didn't match their story. They had inconsistencies. They left edges visible. Emily Carter's digital presence had no inconsistencies because it had almost nothing at all. She existed online the way people existed online in the mid-90s, before social media made everyone's life permanently visible. She had a phone number and a business address and almost nothing else. Ryan put his phone away and called his father. Daniel picked up on the second ring, which meant he'd been waiting. "Did you look into her?" Ryan asked. "I told you I knew of her," Daniel said. "I need more than that." "Why? What happened?" "Nothing happened. I want to know who she is." Daniel was quiet for a moment, the particular quiet that Ryan had learned to read as his father, thinking about whether to say something directly or find a way around it. "Out to 2 people this morning," Daniel said finally. "People I trust, with connections across the state." When I asked them casually about Emily Carter in Red Valley. One of them said he didn't know her, and the other? Pause. Longer this time. "The other one told me, and these are his words, Ryan, not mine, that she was not someone to push." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, the way you'd tell someone not to touch a hot stove. Just a fact. Ryan felt something shift in the base of his chest. "It doesn't tell me anything specific." "No," Daniel said. "It doesn't," which is itself specific. He cleared his throat. "I've been in business in this state for 30 years, dealt with difficult people, with competitors, with legal opposition, with individuals who were considerably more aggressive about conflict than Emily Carter has been. You know how those situations feel. I know the texture of them." He paused again. "This feels different. You're scared of a mechanic, cautious about something I don't fully understand," Daniel said, and his voice had the particular flatness of a man who was done being argued with. "I would strongly recommend you be cautious too. Pay for the motorcycle, apologize to the boy." Ryan ended the call. He sat in the parking lot of the gym for a long time. And then, because he was 24 years old and had spent 24 years being the most formidable person in any room he entered, he made the decision that people who have never genuinely lost anything always eventually make. He decided to escalate. He called a man named Greg Dalton, who was not a lawyer and not a businessman, but who was the kind of person that families like the Mitchells kept in their periphery for situations that required a different approach. Greg was 40, smooth-voiced, and had an extraordinary talent for making problems disappear through the application of social pressure, the right word to the right person, the right suggestion to a local official, the right conversation with a bank or a landlord or a community organization. "Need you to look at a business," Ryan said. "Small motorcycle repair shop in Red Valley. I need to know what pressure points it has, permits, zoning, inspection history, anything outstanding, to know what can be applied." Greg said he'd make some calls. He called back in 2 hours. It's clean, Greg said, and his voice had something in it that sounded almost like admiration. Completely clean. Permits current, zoning compliant, inspection record, going back 8 years without a single violation. Filed perfectly. No outstanding anything. A pause. Runs this place. Either has an excellent accountant or they've been very careful for a very long time. It has to be something. There's not, Greg said. Ryan, I reached out to a city council contact to ask about zoning pressure options, and he got weird on me. He didn't want to be part of the conversation. It's not something I run into often. Ryan stared at nothing. One more thing, Greg said. There's a motorcycle festival coming up in 3 weeks. Community event. The garage owner had a booth reserved. Had. As of this morning, I reached out to the festival organizing committee through a back channel mentioned that a certain significant donor to the county fair fund had questions about vendor selection and the booth is. Review. Greg's voice was professional, neutral. You want? I can make it go away entirely. Ryan thought about it for less than a second. Done. Ryan felt better for approximately 40 minutes. Marcus called. What did you do? Marcus said. And there was an edge in his voice Ryan hadn't heard before. What you're talking about. Emily Carter's festival booth is already out. That it's been pulled through back channels connected to your father's money. This is Marcus stopped, collected himself, opposite of what you needed to do. I'm applying pressure. That's how you handle situations like this. She hasn't attacked you publicly. She hasn't gone to the press. She hasn't even posted anything on social media. She has been completely quiet and professional, and you just made her the sympathetic figure in a public event that this entire community has an opinion about. Marcus's voice was tight. You handed her something. You handed her a story that everyone in this town can see and understand and be angry about. Small local business owner loses festival spot because rich kid's family made a phone call. Story now. Ryan's jaw tightened. The story is that she's threatening legal action over. He cares about the legal action, Marcus said. People care about what they can see. And what they can see is that you hit a teenager, and now your family is using money to punish the teenager's employer for not letting it go. He took a breath. Stop. Whatever you're doing, stop. Call your father, follow his advice, and make this right before it becomes something else entirely. Ryan hung up. He told himself Marcus was wrong. He told himself he was winning. Those things was true. Emily found out about the festival booth from the committee chair herself, a woman named Donna Reyes, who had run the Red Valley Motorcycle Festival for 11 years and who called Emily that afternoon with an apology in her voice that was also partly a warning. Sorry, Emily. It came from above my level. There was pressure from someone connected to, I can't say the name, but you can probably guess. I fought it. I want you to know I fought it. But these are people with money attached to events we depend on, and I didn't have enough leverage to push back. Donna's voice was worn thin. Terrible. Don't, Emily said. This is useful. Silence. Useful? Yes, Emily said. Thank you for calling me, Donna. She hung up. She sat with the information for exactly as long as it took to understand its full shape. Then she pulled out a notepad, actual paper, not her phone, and wrote 4 things on it. At the 4 things for a while, the way a person looks at pieces of a puzzle that haven't yet clicked together, but that are beginning to suggest their arrangement. Mitchell had just done something that people driven by frustration and pride always did when they couldn't get what they wanted. Through direct confrontation, he had used invisible pressure, operated through a back channel, through money and influence, in a way that couldn't be directly attributed to him. He had reached into a public community event and manipulated it. Dana. And in doing so, he had made 2 significant mistakes. First was that it was visible. Not legally provable yet, perhaps, but visible. One, the kind of visible that people talked about, one said. The second was that he had confirmed something Emily had only suspected before, that the direct approach, insurance, information, one, the legal documentation, one, the patient professional response is working. So because people who feel their position eroding don't reach for invisible leverage unless they're scared that visible leverage isn't doing the job. Scared. He was scared. He was scared, and he was covering it with aggression, and aggression without control was the most predictable thing in the world. Called Sandra. He pulled my festival booth, she said. Back channel. Festival committee chair told me directly, won't name names, but we both know. One, can we add this to the record? We absolutely can, said. Sandra said, and she sounded, the first time, in their conversation history, one, genuinely pleased. Interference with business operations, potentially tortious interference, depending on how we frame it. It's good for us, Emily. I know, Emily said. You want to go public with it? Not yet, Emily said. Let it sit. Let people see it without us having to point at it. Strategic, Sandra said. Patient, Emily corrected. The next 10 days had a particular quality to them, the quality of a situation building pressure that has nowhere to go yet. Trained and fumed, and made 2 more calls to Greg Dalton that produced nothing useful. Mitchell stopped returning his son's calls after the 4th one, which told Ryan, more than anything his father could have actually said. Pulled back, not dramatically, not in any way that constituted an ending, but far enough that the absence was noticeable. The town noticed things. The town of Red Valley was small enough that noticing things was its primary social activity. And what it noticed in the 10 days after Emily Carter's festival booth got pulled was a shift in the way people talked about the whole situation. Original event, the truck, the fence, the bike had been divisible. People had been able to take sides based on pre-existing sympathies, based on what they thought of the Mitchells, or what they thought of Emily, or what they thought about young men with money and young women who worked with their hands. The booth was not divisible. Everyone in Red Valley had a relationship to the festival. 11 years old. It was theirs in the way that community things become yours through participation and tradition. In the festival booth had been pulled not through any official complaint, not through any procedural process, but through a phone call from someone with money to someone who needed the money. People understood that. People did not like it, really heard about it indirectly. The small transactions of community life, a customer who mentioned it while picking up a repaired bike, a neighbor who said something over the fence, Reyes who stopped by to drop off a piece of equipment Emily had left at the festival committee office last year, and who lingered longer than the errand required. People are angry, Donna said. The right people, Emily said. Are you going to do anything? Emily considered the question. I'm going to attend the festival, she said, without a booth. I'm just going to be there. Donna stared at her. That's it, Emily said. She watched Donna work through the logic of that and arrive somewhere she hadn't expected. Because showing up without a booth, attending as a community member, visibly, without complaint or display, was more powerful than any statement Emily could have made. Put the absence of the booth in front of every single person who attended without Emily having to say a word about why it was absent. On the 12th day, Ryan Mitchell did something that surprised everyone, including Marcus. He drove to Noah's house. He knocked on the door. His mother answered it, and the expression on her face when she saw who was standing on her porch could have been standing on her porch and used as a textbook illustration of what barely controlled fury looks like in a human face. She did not speak. She simply stared. I want to talk to Noah, Ryan said. He's willing. Why, she said. It was not a question. Because I owe him an apology, and I want to give it in person. Long silence. Then Noah appeared behind his mother, shoulders still visibly favoring the injured side. He looked at Ryan with an expression that was hard to read, not hostility exactly, but the careful watchfulness of someone who has learned not to assume. Ryan stood on the porch with his hands at his sides. He was not performing this. That was what surprised Noah most, the absence of performance. Her speech, no carefully constructed statement. The young man on a porch, looking at a teenager he had hurt, trying to find words. Shoved you, Ryan said. That was wrong. You weren't part of the situation, and you didn't do anything. And I put my hands on you because I was angry and frustrated, and I took it out on the closest person. It's not who I want to be. He paused. I'm sorry. Looked at him for a long moment. Okay, he said. I heard what you said, Noah said. I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. But I heard what you said. Ryan nodded. He reached into his jacket and produced an envelope. This is for the medical bills, whatever the insurance doesn't cover. He held it out. He took it after a moment. I'll also be contacting Emily's attorney about the motorcycle. Pay for it properly. He turned to leave. Noah said. Ryan stopped. Why did you come here? Noah asked. Dad told you to, didn't he? Ryan turned back. And the answer he gave was the most honest thing he had said in 2 weeks. He told me to. But that's not why I came. He walked back to his truck. Noah stood in the doorway, watching him go, holding the envelope, and his mother stood beside him, and neither of them said anything for a while. Noah's mother said, I don't trust him. I know, Noah said. He was telling the truth just now. Or he thinks he was. What's the difference? Noah thought about it. I don't know yet, he said. Maybe everything. Emily heard about the visit from Noah that evening. She listened to the full account without interrupting. And when Noah finished, she was quiet for a moment. You think of it? She asked. I think he's scared, Noah said, tenting. Not the way people are scared when they think they're going to lose something. People are scared when they're starting to figure out that they've been wrong about themselves. He looked at him. He was 16. He had a bruised shoulder and a bent kickstand on his bicycle, and he had just described something that most adults spent decades failing to identify. Very precise observation, she said. I had time to think, Noah said, twisting my arm. Emily almost smiled. Get some sleep. He hung up the phone and stood alone in the garage. In the particular quiet of late evening, when the town had settled and the sounds from outside were distant and soft, she thought about what Noah had said. She thought about a 24-year-old man knocking on a teenager's door without sending a lawyer first. She thought about the quality of that, what it cost someone like Ryan Mitchell, who had spent his whole life behind the armor of family name and physical dominance, to stand on a porch with his hands at his sides and say he was sorry. It didn't fix what had happened. It didn't resolve the legal situation. It didn't return the festival booth or undamage the Electra. It was something. She thought about it the way she thought about all complicated things carefully, without rushing to a conclusion, turning it from different angles until she could see its actual shape. Then she picked up her phone and sent a second message to the 6 contacts. Words this time. Be ready. It's time. The festival was 1 week away. Emily Carter, who had spent years learning that the most powerful move was sometimes simply showing up exactly as you were, was going to be there. Hadn't told anyone what she hadn't shared with Sandra or Noah in Donna Reyes. Anyone in Red Valley was that she would not be showing up alone. Before the festival, Red Valley held its breath without knowing it was holding it. The thing about small towns, they absorbed tension the way fabric absorbs water, slowly and completely, until the whole thing was saturated. And everyone was carrying weight they couldn't quite name. People went about their normal lives. They bought groceries and filled gas tanks and had the same conversations they always had. But underneath it, something had shifted. Something was tightening. Mitchell felt it every time he walked into a room. He had spent his entire life being the person people moved toward, the athlete, the fighter, the son of the man whose name was on things. It was something else. Not an outcast, nothing that dramatic. There's a gap forming between him and the people around him. A gap made of hesitations and redirected eye contact and conversations that stopped one beat too early when he entered. And he felt it at the gym. He felt it at the hardware store when he ran into a man who had known his father for 20 years and whose greeting was cordial and nothing else. He felt it at dinner with his family, where his father spoke only about business, and his mother asked questions about his training schedule with the careful cheerfulness of someone choosing neutral ground. He had apologized to Noah. He had offered to pay for the motorcycle. He'd done the things Marcus and his father had told him to do, and none of it had produced the relief he'd expected. The situation was not going away. It was simply taking a different shape. Noticed Ryan's mood darkening, and said nothing for 3 days. On the fourth day, he sat across from him in the gym's back room and finally said what he'd been sitting with. "You need to understand something," Marcus said. Apologizing to Noah was right. The motorcycle is right. But those things don't erase what happened. They just change what the story is going forward. The story that already happened is already out there, and you can't take it back. I looked at him. "So what am I supposed to do with that?" "Nothing," Marcus said. "You live with it. That's what accountability actually is. It's not doing the right thing and then feeling better." Words. And one ending. It's doing the right thing and accepting that you still have to sit with what you did before that. It's easy for you to say. "It really isn't," Marcus said quietly. Ryan looked away. A knot in his chest that training hadn't touched in 2 weeks. The kind of knot that comes from knowing something about yourself that you hadn't known before and finding the knowledge uncomfortable in a way that doesn't resolve something, Marcus said. "What do you actually know about her?" "Not her business, not her garage." "Nothing," Ryan said. "Exactly," Marcus leaned forward. "You walked into her place and you treated her like she was nothing because she looked like nothing to you. You made a judgment based on the surface of things. And the whole situation since then, every step that's gotten worse, has been because of that original mistake." He paused. "You didn't see her. You looked at her and you saw a mechanic, which meant you saw someone you didn't need to take seriously. And she has spent the last 2 weeks showing you exactly how wrong that was." Anne said nothing. "Who is she?" Marcus asked. That's the question you should have asked on day one. It's the same question that had been sitting at the back of Ryan's mind since the conversation with his father, since Greg Dalton's call about the perfectly clean business record, since his own contact in the writing community had paused, and then said words like careful and serious in a tone that had nothing casual in it. Afternoon, Ryan made a different kind of call. To Greg Dalton, not to a lawyer. He called a man named Pete Alvarez, who was 54 years old and had ridden motorcycles since he was 17, and who had been, at points in his life, of communities that Ryan only understood from the outside. Pete was not someone Ryan called often. Pete was someone Ryan's father had introduced him to years ago as a contact to respect and not to bother unless it was important. Had used the contact exactly once before, for a situation that didn't matter now. Picked up on the fourth ring. "Ryan Mitchell," he said, and his voice said he already knew this call was coming without saying so. "I need to ask you about someone," Ryan said. "I figured. Carter, Red Valley. She runs a motorcycle garage." Silence. "Not a long one, but the kind that has weight." "Did you run into Emily Carter?" "She's local to me. We had a situation." "What kind of situation?" Ryan explained it briefly. Factually, the way you explain something to someone you think might tell you it was your fault. Pete did, almost immediately. "You put your hands on a kid," Pete said. "It isn't a question. It was a shove. I wasn't thinking." "Two separate problems," Pete said. "Not thinking is one thing. Shove is another." A pause. "How bad did it get?" "He's got an attorney involved. She had the booth at the festival. I made a call. Got it pulled." Ryan heard how it sounded as he said it. He'd been hearing how things sounded differently these past 2 weeks, which was its own kind of progress and its own kind of pain. "She pulled her festival booth," Pete repeated. Through back channels. Silence. "This one longer, Ryan." Pete said. His voice had gone somewhere very specific, not angry. Saying, not theatrically thin, but the kind of direct that cuts through everything else. "To tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it. Emily Carter is not a mechanic who happens to know some riders," Pete said. "Someone who has earned respect in this community over a very long time. Not by asking for it, not by claiming it, by doing things for people that those people never forgot. One, bikes she fixed for families who had nothing. Situations she stepped into where someone needed someone. Loyalty she kept when keeping it wasn't easy." He paused. "The people who know her really know her. They don't talk about her publicly because that's not how that world works. They know. And what you've done to her is not invisible to those people." Ryan's mouth was dry. "What kind of connections does she have?" Permanent kind, Pete said. The kind built on years of showing up when you said you would and doing what you said you'd do. The kind that don't expire. He took a breath. I want to ask you something, and I want you to think before you answer. What did she say to you at the beginning, before any of this escalated? What were her exact words? Ryan thought back to the garage, to Emily, standing in front of him with her hands still, her face unreadable. She said, walk away while you still have the chance. Silence on the other end of the line had a texture to it. She gave you the door, Pete said quietly. She opened it and she held it and she told you to walk through it. He paused once more. Ryan, fix this. Because you're scared of what happens if you don't fix it, cause it's right. And do it before the festival. Ryan drove home with the windows down even though it was cold, needing the air, needing the feeling of movement against his face while he sorted through what he was thinking. He called his father that evening. I want to settle this, Ryan said. $1,000. The motorcycle, the attorney's fees. Little booth. I want Donna Raistas to get a personal call reinstating Emily's spot. And I want it to come from me, from your office. Daniel was quiet for a moment. What changed? I talked to someone who knows her. It doesn't matter. Ryan paused. I want to apologize to her. Person. Before the festival. Another silence. She may not receive you. I'm going to ask anyway. Daniel said nothing for 3 seconds. Then I'll have the attorney draw up a settlement agreement. Replacement value for the motorcycle, plus any legal fees Sandra Chen has accrued. I want to bring it to her myself. Ryan said. Not through a lawyer. I'll take the paperwork and I'll bring it to her and I'll say what I have to say in person. Daniel exhaled slowly. All right, he said. And there was something in his father's voice that Ryan hadn't heard in a long time, something that might have been quietly approval. Emily was in the garage on Thursday morning, 4 days before the festival, when Ryan Mitchell's truck pulled up in front. The engine. She knew the truck by sound. Now there was a particular rattle in the exhaust that she had noticed the first time and that she noticed again now. Come out immediately. She finished what she was doing, capping the tool she was holding, setting it down on the bench in its proper place. Then she wiped her hands and walked to the garage door. Ryan was standing beside his truck. He was not wearing the fitted shirt and the practiced posture of someone who had come to win. Wearing jeans and a plain jacket, and he's standing with his hands loose at his sides, and there was something about the absence of performance that was the first thing Emily registered. He was holding a folder. I called ahead, he said. I left a message. I know you may not have had time to. You got the message, Emily said. I decided to hear what you have to say in person. Ryan nodded. He held out the folder, settlement agreement, replacement value for the Electra Glide. My father's attorney assessed it against your independent appraisal and matched it, plus Sandra Chen's fees through today. Everything signed on my side. He paused. It also called Donna Reyes yesterday. Your booth at the festival is reinstated. The call came from me, not my father's office. Emily took the folder and looked through it without rushing. The way she looked at any document carefully, without pretending to read faster than she was actually reading. She finished. She closed it. Thank you, she said. Ryan shifted his weight slightly. I want to say something else for the agreement, just personally. Emily looked at him and waited. Here, 3 weeks ago, and I made about 15 assumptions in the first 30 seconds, he said. Who you were, about what you were worth, about what I could do, and what would happen if I did it. Every single one of those assumptions was wrong. Not just about you, about myself. He paused. Words were clearly costing him something. I put my hands on no part I can't explain or contextualize or make better with a settlement agreement. I was wrong. I was the kind of wrong that means something about who I am, and I've had to sit with that. He looked at her directly. Sorry for all of it, for the way I treated you from the first second. Studied him. Not the way you study someone you distrust, but the way you study something you're trying to see accurately. How old are you? She asked. 24. Do you know what I was doing at 24? And shook his head. Nothing I'm proud of, Emily said. Not nothing in the practical sense. I was capable and skilled, and I was getting things done. Also making the same kind of mistake you made. Looking at what I had and thinking it was all I needed to know. Thinking that capability was the same thing as understanding. She paused. Most 24-year-olds make that mistake. The ones who figure it out are the ones worth paying attention to. Something moved through Ryan's face. He wasn't sure what to do with that, with the fact that she was not delivering a verdict, but offering something that was almost in its way, a context. You know if I've figured it out, he said, honestly. Standing here, Emily said, that's part of figuring it out. He looked at the settlement folder. Again. I'll have Sandra review this today. Order. We can close the legal matter by end of week. Ryan said. He turned to go. Ryan, Emily said. Stopped. Come to the festival, she said, if you're willing. Back. And the expression on his face was the most unguarded thing she had seen from him. Surprise, with nothing composed over it. You want me to come to the festival? You want a lot of people to come to the festival, Emily said, including you. He drove away, and Emily stood in the open garage door holding the settlement folder, and the morning was very quiet around her. She thought about what she'd said and why she'd said it. From softness, not from the absence of anger. She had not stopped being angry about Noah's shoulder, and she suspected she would be carrying a version of that anger for some time. But she had made a distinction long ago and at considerable cost between anger that was useful and anger that corroded. Useful kind drove you to act, to document, to hold your ground without losing yourself. Corroding kind just ate at you while you thought you were eating at someone else. Mitchell was 24 and had been handed every advantage and had used them badly and was now, visibly, paying for that in ways that went deeper than money. Still, she knew that shape. She had a relationship to that shape. She went back inside to finish the carburetor. The festival arrived the way events in small towns always arrive with a burst of organized chaos that had been invisible in the weeks of preparation and was suddenly, completely, everywhere at once. People set up on Main Street, banners hanging, the particular smell of food vendors and engine oil mixing in the September morning air. The sound of the crowd building from a murmur to a full voice over the course of an hour. Arrived early. She set up her booth with Noah beside her, his arm, mostly recovered, the sling gone a week ago, though he still favored the shoulder in ways he probably didn't notice. Display of restored parts, some printed information about the shop, and 2 bikes Emily had brought on the trailer specifically for the event, the Electra Glide, paired with the sourced period-correct parts that the settlement money had covered, and a 1,971 Sportster that Noah had done 60% of the restoration work on himself. People came by. They looked at the bikes. They talked to Emily and Noah. There was a warmth in those interactions that was slightly different from previous years, more deliberate, more personal, as if people were choosing their engagement rather than drifting into it. Reyes stopped by twice before noon, the second time just to squeeze Emily's arm and not say anything, which said everything. Arrived at 11:30. He came alone. No entourage, no Marcus. No one from his family. He was wearing a plain jacket again. And he moved through the festival crowd with a different kind of attention than he usually wore, more aware of the people around him, less confident in his centrality. He stopped at Emily's booth and looked at the Electra Glide. The one? He asked. That's the one, Emily said. Looks perfect. It is, Emily said. It was before too. Parts were sourced from a dealer in Denver. Took 3 weeks to arrive. And nodded. He reached out and almost touched the fender, then stopped himself. Can I? Go ahead. He put his hand on the chrome and ran his thumb along the edge of it, and there was something in that gesture, in the care of it, that was completely different from the person who had driven his truck through her fence. I can't undo what happened, he said quietly. Emily agreed. But you can determine what happens after. He straightened up. He looked at her. Thank you, he said, for letting me come. Thank you for coming, she said. He stayed at the festival for 2 hours. He walked to people, some of whom were clearly uncertain how to receive him, some of whom were warmer than he expected. He found Marcus at one point, and the two of them stood together for a while, watching a group of older riders discuss a vintage Indian in the display section. Clapped him on the shoulder once, which said enough. Noon came and went. The festival was building toward its peak afternoon crowd. And then Emily heard it. One engine, distant but distinct. Then a second. Then more, layering on top of each other, building into something that was less a sound and more a vibration, something you felt in your sternum before you processed it with your ears. The crowd heard it too. People turned, looking toward the main entrance to the festival grounds, and the conversations around them softened and then stilled as the sound grew. Dozens. The sound of dozens of engines rolling together, unhurried, with the particular authority of people who were going exactly where they meant to go. Bike came through the entrance. Then another. Then another. Black leather vests, powerful machines, the kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself because it arrived already announced. Slowly, emotion. And they filled the space. They entered, not with aggression, but with something more fundamental, with weight, with reality, is fit with the undeniable fact of themselves. 63 riders. Emily would learn the exact number later. She didn't count them now. She just watched them come in, and she felt something in her chest that was recognition and relief, and both of those gone. The specific deep gratitude of someone who sent a message into the dark and heard it answered, hearted without discussion. The way crowds do when something more significant than what they expected enters the room. The lead rider pulled forward and stopped. Victor Stone Ramirez was 58 years old, with a face that had been shaped over decades by weather and experience, and the specific discipline of a man who had led other men through things that didn't have clean names. It was not physically imposing. The way Ryan was not built for performance, it was built for duration. There was a difference, and anyone who had spent real time in real situations understood it immediately. He cut his engine. He got off the bike. He walked directly to Emily's booth, and the 62 riders behind him held their positions without being told to, because they had been in enough situations with Victor to know when to hold and when to move. Victor stopped in front of Emily. He looked at her for a moment, the look of someone who knows a person well and is checking to make sure she is okay, which is different from the look of someone who is assessing or evaluating. He said. I called, Emily said. You should have called sooner. You had it, Emily said. I know you had it, Victor said, and something at the corner of his mouth moved slightly. You'll always have it. That's not the point. The entire festival ground was watching, not in the tense way that crowds watch something they are afraid of, but in the arrested way that crowds watch something they don't fully understand but can feel is significant. People who had never been to anything more than a local event, who had lived their whole lives inside the ordinary rhythms of Red Valley, were standing 15 feet from something they were going to be talking about for years. Mitchell was in the crowd. He was standing very still, and his face had the expression of someone who has had a final, complete understanding of something they had been slowly approaching for weeks. Not shock, exactly. Something more like revelation, the recognition of the full shape of a thing you had been seeing only partially. He looked at Emily Carter, at the woman he had dismissed in 30 seconds, the woman he had tried intimidate, the woman whose festival booth he had pulled through a phone call, the woman he had thought was powerless, and he understood with total clarity that she had never been any of those things, that she had stood in front of him 3 weeks ago and known exactly what she was standing there with, and had chosen the reasons that were hers alone, not to show it, about what she had said to him that first day. Walk away while you still have the chance. She had not been afraid. She had been offering him something. Ryan felt something happen in his chest that was not comfortable. The particular pain of seeing yourself accurately from this outside in a moment when the view is not flattering. He had spent 24 years being the most powerful person in most rooms he entered. He had built his identity on that fact, and he was standing in a festival crowd watching 63 people arrive in loyalty to a woman he had mistaken for nothing. and the gap between who he thought he was and who he actually was felt. In that moment, like a physical distance, he had to cross. Victor was still standing in front of Emily. "Tell me what happened," he said. Emily told him, briefly, without drama, and the way she always recounted things, just the facts, present, in sequence, with no editorializing. Victor listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Boy," he said. "Noah, he's here," Emily said. When still, she gestured, and Noah raised his hand slightly from his position near the sport, looking at Victor with the careful attention of a person meeting someone he had heard about without knowing he was going to. He looked at Noah for a long moment. Then he nodded, a slow, deliberate nod that meant something specific in the language he operated in. He turned and scanned the crowd. "Which one is Mitchell's son?" he asked. Did not point. She did not need to. Victor's gaze moved through the crowd until it found Ryan. Ryan met his gaze across the distance without looking away. Because despite everything, despite all the ways the past 3 weeks had taken apart his certainty about himself, he still had enough in him to meet a gaze directly. Victor studied him for 3 seconds. Then he turned back to Emily. "The festival," Victor said. "I asked him too," Emily said. Victor raised an eyebrow slightly. "You asked him?" He apologized to Noah. "He came to me personally. He reinstated the booth." She paused. "He's 24. He made bad decisions from a place of arrogance he'd never been asked to examine. He's been asked to examine it, and," Victor said. "He's examining it," Emily said, "which is more than most people do." He looked at her for a long moment. The kind of long moment that happens between people who have known each other through enough to not need to feel silent. "Too fair," he said finally. "I'm exactly as fair as the situation requires," Emily said. Something moved across Victor's face that might, in another context, have been called a smile. "Booth thing," he said. He actually reinstated it himself. Called Donna Reyes directly. Didn't route it through his father. Victor absorbed this. "That took something," he said. "It did," Emily agreed, behind Victor. Zan's when the 62 riders were beginning to ease off their bikes, spreading through the festival with a kind of deliberate normality, not performing, not displaying, just being present in the way that large numbers of unified people are present, which is itself a statement without needing to be one. People in the crowd began to approach them cautiously. At first, then with more ease as it became clear that the riders were at a festival, not a confrontation. At bikes, they talked to people. One with a large man with a red beard named Carver, not me. Spent 20 minutes with an older gentleman who turned out to have ridden a similar model in the 1970s, and their conversation was completely absorbed and warm. The festival was shifting around them, not its structure, the same booths, the same vendors, the same announcements over the same speakers, but in its atmosphere. The tension that had been building in the Valley for 3 weeks, the unnamed weight of a situation unresolved, was finding its resolution, not through confrontation, but through presence. Through the simple, undeniable demonstration of who Emily Carter actually was and what she was actually connected to. Found Ryan in the crowd. After 20 minutes. "Okay," Marcus asked. "I don't know," Ryan said honestly. Mark stood beside him, and they both watched Victor Ramirez talking with Emily at her booth, an easy conversation. The conversation of the people who had a long history and no need to perform for each other. "She told him you apologized," Marcus said, "and reinstated the booth yourself." Ryan turned to look at him. "How do you know that?" "Told me," Marcus said, nodding toward the large man with the red beard. "I know him from the circuit. Peripherally." He paused. "What Victor Ramirez just did coming here, bringing those riders, that wasn't intimidation. Understand that?" "It wasn't intimidation," Ryan said. "It's testimony," Marcus said. 63 people who showed up on a Saturday for no reason except that she asked them to. That's 63 separate relationships she has built and maintained over years. That's 63 people who have something to remember. He looked at Ryan. That's what real respect looks like. Not what you win, what you build, and watched Emily lean on her workbench and laugh at something. Victor said a genuine laugh, reserved. The laugh of someone completely at ease. And he thought about the first time he had seen her in that garage, with her hands calloused and her clothes permanently stained and her manner quiet. He thought about dismissing her in 30 seconds. He thought about laughing when she said walk away. Specific, terrible clarity of being wrong in a way that couldn't be made fully right. And then he did something that Marcus did not expect. Crossed the festival ground, moving through the crowd until he reached Emily's booth. He was standing again in front of Emily Carter. Victor Ramirez was still there, and his eyes moved to Ryan without warmth or coldness, with assessment clear and honest. "You want to say something," Ryan said to Emily in front of him. He glanced at Victor. "If that's what it takes." Emily looked at him. "Say it then." Ryan took a breath. "I came in here 3 weeks ago, and I acted like the rules that apply to everyone else didn't apply to me," he said. "Because they hadn't. Not yet. Every time I'd done something wrong, the name or the money or the belt fixed it. Every time I put pressure on someone, they moved." He paused. "He didn't move." "No," Emily said. "And instead of asking myself why, instead of asking what that meant about you or about me, I pushed harder. It got Noah hurt. I used back channels to take your booth." He stopped. Cheeked. "Anne, I'm standing here because I don't know how to say I'm sorry in a way that's big enough for what I did. I'm trying. That's the only thing I know how to do right now." I told him, "Just keep trying." Victor looked at him for a long time. He said, "What's your name, son?" "Ryan Mitchell." "Ryan Mitchell," Victor repeated. "You know what the hardest thing in the world is for someone who's always been the strongest person in the room?" He shook his head. "Walking into a room where you're not," Victor said. "People never recover from it. They spend the rest of their lives pretending it didn't happen." He paused. "You walked into this booth twice. That counts for something." Ryan nodded. He didn't speak because there was nothing to add to that. Bun. He stepped back. He moved to the edge of the booth where Noah was standing beside the Sportster, and he stopped there, looked at him without hostility. "Nice bike," Ryan said. "Stored 60% of it," Noah said. Ryan looked at it with genuine attention. "Which 60%? Noah started talking, and Ryan listened. "Everyone." And neither of them performed anything. "Everyone." And in the middle of a festival in a small Montana town, surrounded by 63 riders, and a crowd that would be talking about this day for a very long time, something small and real and possibly permanent began to take shape between them. Watched it from the front of the booth, beside Victor, and Victor watched it too. "You might be worth something someday," Victor said, quietly. "He might," Emily said. She picked up a wrench from her workbench, the small automatic gesture of a person whose hands always found their way back to work, and turned it slowly in her fingers. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You called," Victor said simply. "That's all it takes." Noon deepened around them. Then the festival went on. Red Valley absorbed something that day that it would take a long time to fully understand, the understanding that the quietest person in the room was not the weakest. Respect built through years of showing up looked nothing like respect demanded power, and that sometimes the most significant thing a person could do was exactly what Emily Carter had done all along. Stand still, know your worth, and let the truth speak for itself. The festival incided the way good days, and in small towns, slowly, with people reluctant to leave, is lingering in conversations that kept starting new threads just when they were about to close. Stayed until late afternoon. They didn't announce their departure any more than they had announced their arrival. Said something to Carver, and Carver said something to two others, and within 10 minutes the group was reassembling with the quiet coordination of people who had moved together enough times that the process was automatic. Victor came back to Emily's booth one last time before he left. "You need anything else, you call," he said. "I will," Emily said. "Wait as long next time." I had it. His voice carried the particular weight of someone who had watched a person be self-sufficient to the point of stubbornness for a long time and had made a permanent peace with it while still reserving the right to comment. "You had it. Call anyway." She nodded. He left. She watched the bikes roll out of the festival grounds with the same unhurried authority with which they'd arrived, and she stood there until the sound of them faded below the ambient noise of the crowd dawning, and then she turned back to her booth and began the process of packing up. Noah was beside her in seconds. "I'll get the tie-downs for the trailer," he said. "With the display pieces," Emily said. They worked in their usual rhythm, efficient, quiet, no wasted motion. On them, the festival was winding down. Other vendors doing the same. The crowd thinning into the particular, relaxed dispersal of people who had gotten what they came for and were now carrying it home. Mitchell was still there. Lee noticed it because she noticed most things, and because his presence at the edge of the festival ground had a quality to it that was different from the usual foot traffic, stationary and deliberate, a person who was staying on purpose. He was not watching her pack up. Exactly. He was standing near the vintage bike display, looking at a pre-war Indian that belonged to a collector from Garrison. Even when he talk, and he was listening to the collector talk with the kind of attention that meant he was hearing it, but his mind was partly somewhere else. This was beside him. Marcus was talking quietly, and Ryan was nodding at intervals. He finished with the display pieces and moved to the bikes. It was another 20 minutes before Ryan crossed the ground and came back to the booth. By then the trailer was loaded, and Noah was checking the straps with the methodical care Emily had taught him, running each one twice. "Can I ask you something?" Ryan said. Emily looked at him. "Victor Ramirez." He paused, choosing the phrasing carefully. "How long have you known him?" 19 years, Emily said. Ryan absorbed that. "How did you meet?" Emily picked up a hand tool that had been left on the display table and turned it in her fingers once before setting it in the kit. "I fixed his bike," she said. "He was stranded 2 hours outside of Billings on a February night. He'd been riding in conditions he should not have been riding in, and the bike had a fuel delivery problem that he couldn't diagnose on his own. It was the only shop that answered a cold call at 11 p.m. 2 hours at 11 p.m. in February. The bike was a 1966 Electra Glide," Emily said, "and he sounded like someone who needed help." Ryan was quiet for a moment. That's how it started?" "That's how most things start," Emily said. "You need something. You show up or you don't." She looked at him directly. "Victor has sent me business every year since then. He sent riders to me from 4 states because he trusts my work. He's called me twice when situation developed that required someone with my background. He called him when I needed someone with his." She paused. 19 years of that. That's what you were up against when you walked into my garage." Ryan looked at the ground for a moment. "I didn't know. Everyone in this town knew," Emily said. "That's not an accident. You'd advertise it. It's not something that needs to be on a sign." She put the toolkit in the truck bed. "The people who matter know. The people who don't need to know don't." It proved I was one of the people who didn't need to know, Ryan said. It wasn't a question. "You proved you were someone who made assumptions based on surfaces," Emily said. "Whether that's permanently. Who you are is a different question." Ryan looked up. "What's the answer?" "I don't know yet," Emily said honestly. "Do you?" "That's fine. The question is whether you keep asking it." She closed the truck bed. Noah finished checking the last strap and looked up. He said. Emily gave the trailer a final look. "It's work today," she told Noah. Noah nodded with the particular combination of pride and normalcy that meant the compliment had landed, but he wasn't going to make anything of it. He'd learned that from her, too. Ryan watched the exchange with an expression Emily couldn't fully read, something between admiration and something more personal that she didn't push on. "Man, I'll see you around," Ryan said. "Probably," Emily said. She got in the truck. She pulled out of the festival ground. In the rearview mirror, she could see Ryan standing where she'd left him. Watching the truck go. Marcus saying something. Ryan not responding. Standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets and his face doing the private work of someone who is processing something that won't finish processing for a while. He thought about the 19 years she'd told him about. He thought about what she hadn't told him, which was considerably more. The story of how Emily Carter came to be who she was, the full story, not the version she offered in a festival parking lot, was not a simple one. It's not the kind of story that started in Red Valley or ended there. It's the kind of story that had required her to become someone very different before she could become who she was. And the distance between those two people was measured not in years, but in decisions. Once, and went still, in moments where she had chosen differently than the version of herself she was leaving behind would have chosen. She'd been good at things that were not always good things. She had been one for a period of her life, denied systems and situations that she did not discuss with anyone in Red Valley and would not discuss because she was ashamed. She had made a peace with shame that was its own long story, but because the past was not what defined her now, and explaining it would require giving it more room than it deserved. What mattered was what she had done with what she'd learned from it. The ability to read a situation before it became dangerous. The ability to move through on conflict without becoming part of the conflict. The ability to build relationships that were based on something real, on showing up, on keeping her word, on doing the hard thing when the easier thing was available, so that when she needed those relationships, actually there were the things that had made the difference over the past 3 weeks. Money, not a lawyer, though Sandra had been invaluable, of 63 riders. Though that had been, she was honest with herself about this, a profound relief to have available when the moment called for it. It made the difference. Was the 19 years before today. She drove home thinking about Ryan Mitchell's face when Victor's bikes rolled through the festival entrance. The specific quality of that moment, the way his certainty had collapsed, not with a crash, but with a slow, total settling, the way a structure gives way when the ground underneath it shifts. She thought about what Victor had said. He might be worth something someday. She thought about Noah saying he's figuring out that he's been wrong about himself. She thought about what it cost someone like Ryan, someone whose entire identity had been built on being the most formidable thing in any room, to stand in a booth and say, I don't know how to say I'm sorry in a way that's big enough for what I did. She pulled into the garage. She sat for a moment with the engine off. The festival had been a resolution of the public situation. The legal matter was settled. The community had witnessed what it needed to witness. Victor and his riders had done what their presence did threaten. Not intimidated, but testified, as Marcus has said, to who Emily was through the simple fact of showing up. It was another situation that had not resolved. One that was not about her and Ryan and the public eye of Red Valley. It was about Daniel Mitchell. 3 days after the festival, Daniel Mitchell's office called Sandra Chen with a settlement addendum, not with a legal filing, with a personal request for a meeting. Daniel Mitchell and Emily Carter, no attorneys, no intermediaries, had called Emily immediately, and her voice on the phone had the particular, careful note of a lawyer who was presenting information and withholding her opinion until asked. It's unusual, Sandra said. Men like Daniel Mitchell don't request meetings like this unless they want something or they're worried about something. Is that it's the second one? What does he want to discuss? Emily asked. His office didn't specify. The word they used was perspective. He wants to understand what happened, Emily said. It's my read too, Sandra said. The question is whether you want to give it to him. He thought about it. Set the meeting, she said. Set it, Sandra. A pause. It should be in a public place. I'll suggest the diner on 3rd, Emily said. Noon on Thursday. He can come alone or not at all. Sandra called back 40 minutes later. Alone. Daniel Mitchell arrived at the diner on Thursday at 11:58, which told Emily he was not the kind of man who arrived late when he wanted something. He was wearing a business jacket over an open collar. The precise midpoint between formal and accessible that people in his position wore when they wanted to be taken seriously without appearing combative. He was trim and sharp-eyed, and he walked to the booth she was already sitting in with the straight posture of a man who had spent decades making sure his physical bearing communicated exactly the authority he intended. He looked at her. Emily looked back. The waitress came and they both ordered coffee, and neither of them spoke until the waitress left. "Thank you for meeting me," Daniel said. "You asked?" Emily said, curious. Something flickered in his expression, appreciation, maybe for the directness. "I want to understand something," he said. "Not for legal reasons, for business reasons. Personally. Go ahead." "The settlement is done. The legal situation is closed. He's made a genuine effort, I think, to understand what he did wrong. Believe that." He paused. "What I want to understand is you." He waited. "I made inquiries," Daniel said, "after the situation started. Out to people I trust. Peach people with reach across the state. He would tell me much about you. That's unusual. Doing business in Montana for 30 years. When I ask about someone, I get information. With you, I got careful answers." Answers. He looked at her steadily. "Who are you?" He held his gaze. "I'm a mechanic who runs a garage in Red Valley." "Part of it," Daniel said. "It's the relevant part," Emily said. "Disagree." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "Spent the past 3 weeks watching my son encounter someone for the first time in his life who didn't move when he pushed. Resources he hadn't anticipated, who handled a situation with more discipline and more strategy than most professionals I've worked with." He paused. "And I want to understand where that comes from, because I think it matters to him and frankly, for my own peace of mind." He looked at him for a long moment. Outside the diner, ordinary sounds of a Thursday noon in Red Valley moved past a truck. Someone's conversation on the sidewalk. The bell above the diner door as someone entered. "Would knowing it give you?" she asked. The question surprised him. She could see it in the slight hesitation before he answered. "Standing," he said. "Of what?" "Of whether I should have handled this differently from the beginning," Daniel said. "I missed when Ryan came to me that first day and told me what happened." It was honest. More honest than she'd expected. Emily took a breath and made a decision, not a large one, not anything she hadn't made before, but a specific one about how much of herself to give to this particular conversation. She spent 7 years working in a context that required everything I know about reading situations, she said, about knowing when to push and when to wait, about building relationships with people who don't give trust easily. One love that context. "I came here, I built the garage, which is real and is what I do, and has been my life for the past 12 years. She stopped. Specifics of what that context was are not something I discuss, but the skills it gave me are the ones you observed. The relationships it gave me, Victor Ramirez, and others are what your son encountered." And Daniel was very still. "You were in law enforcement," he said. He said nothing. "Or something adjacent to it," he said. Still nothing. "All right," Daniel said, and his voice had the quality of a man who has reached the edge of what he's going to learn and is making his peace with it. "Push." He picked up his coffee. "I want to say something to you." "Say it." "I failed my son," Daniel said. He blinked once, which was the closest she came to showing surprise. Not in the practical sense. He had every resource, every opportunity, everything I could give him. Daniel's voice was steady, but there was something underneath the steadiness that had weight. I gave him money and access and connections, and I got him the best trainers, and I told him his name meant something, and I let him believe. I actively helped him believe that those things were being someone worth respecting. He paused. "I know that. I've known it for years. Just didn't apply the knowledge to my own son." Emily looked at him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Why are you telling me this? Because you're the one who showed him the difference," Daniel said. "Through a lesson. Not through anything intended. Just by being what you are." He set his cup down. "And I owe you an apology. Just for the legal situation. For the fact that the person I raised walked into your garage and behaved the way he behaved. That starts with me." The diner moved around them. The cups clinked somewhere behind her. "Somebody laughed at the counter," he said. "He came to my garage himself. He stood in my booth at the festival and he said things that were honest. Whatever you did or didn't do. He found his way to that. With considerable help from circumstances," Daniel said dryly. Circumstances you don't fully control, Emily said. He chose to show up twice. That was him, not circumstances. Was quiet for a moment. You're more generous than I expected, he said. Yes, I'm accurate, Emily said. There's a difference. Timid. He looked at her. Just a moment. Saw it. Daniel Mitchell. 63 years old, years of business. Not one. A man whose name was on buildings looked like what he was underneath all of that, which was a father, who was sitting with the knowledge that he had handed his son a set of beliefs that had led him to a garage in Red Valley on the wrong side of a situation he had no business being on the wrong side of. What did you have him do? Daniel asked, going forward. Him figure out what his strength is actually for. Emily said, not what it protects him from, what it's for. She thought for a moment. He trains every day. He's disciplined about that, Ito said. He's good at it. She paused. The question is whether he's training to protect his ego or training to become someone who can stand in front of a hard thing without flinching. Look the same from the outside for a while. Eventually they don't. When Daniel absorbed that, and you can tell the difference. You can tell the difference, Emily said. He reached into his jacket and produced an envelope. He set it on the table between them. This is separate from the settlement, he said. This is from me, personally, for the disruption to your business during the 3 weeks of the situation. What it cost you in time and attention and energy that should have gone to your work. He held up a hand when she began to shake her head. You don't need it. I know it doesn't fix anything. I need to make it. For my own accounting of this. Looked at the envelope. She left it on the table. Towards something in your son's name, she said. Fun. Public. Something people can see. Daniel stared at her. Scholarship for young people in trades, Emily said. Mechanics. Electrical. The things that get overlooked when families have enough money to overlook them. She held his gaze. Something that says his name publicly and says it's attached to a good thing. Something to live up to. Daniel picked up the envelope slowly. He looked at it. He looked at her. That's either very wise or very hard, he said. Those are the same thing, Emily said. He put the envelope back in his jacket. Just K. They finished their coffee. When they left, they did not shake hands. It would have been the wrong gesture for what the conversation had actually been. Mitchell. Daniel Mitchell walked to his car with the deliberate pace of a man who had more to think about than he'd expected. And Emily stood outside the diner for a moment in the September air, letting the afternoon settle around her. The phone buzzed. Noah, is the differential on Mr. Truck the same process as a bike? She almost smiled. Typed back, similar principle, different scale. Show you Monday. She drove back to the garage. It worked until 7, and it was good work, the kind that required full attention and left no room for anything else, which was exactly what she needed. Replacing the primary chain on a customer's dyna that had been wearing for 2 seasons longer than it should have. The job required patience and precision, and the particular satisfaction of work done properly on a machine that would carry someone safely because of it. 7:15. Marcus Webb knocked on the open garage door. Lee looked up. She had been expecting this visit, if not on this exact evening, then sometime in the near future. Was too perceptive to not have questions, and too honest to not eventually ask them. Come in, she said. He came in and stood near the workbench, looking around the garage with the unhurried attention of someone who worked with their hands and understood the language of a space organized around craft. I set up, he said. It works, Emily said. She went back to the chain. Do you want to know? How much of it did you know in advance? Marcus asked, before it all played out. Most of it, Emily said. Not the specifics, but the shape of it. You knew he'd escalate. People like Ryan, people who've never stopped, they escalate. The pattern. They push harder when the soft approach doesn't work because they don't have another strategy. She worked the chain carefully. The festival booth was predictable. The back channel approach was predictable. And the apology to Noah, I didn't know exactly when, but I knew it was coming once he ran out of other moves and had to sit with himself. He ran the whole thing, Marcus said. Not accusatory, almost wondering. I let it run, Emily said. There's a difference. Didn't manufacture any of it. He made every choice he made on his own. She looked up. He did was not panic, retaliate, sounds everyone not escalate in kind, thing, and make sure everything was documented. And when the moment required something more, I made one call. To Victor, she confirmed. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Did Ryan ever actually threaten you with? Legally, specifically? Nothing that would have held, Emily said. The zoning complaint was hollow. My record is clean. Social pressure was real, but limited. The festival booth was the most substantive thing he did, and it backfired immediately. She set the chain tool down and turned to face him fully. Didn't understand. The thing most people in his position don't understand is that pressure only works on things that are actually vulnerable. He spent 12 years in this town making sure there's nothing vulnerable to press on. Marcus asked, "Why that much care?" Emily looked at him. It was the edge of the conversation, the place where answering fully would require more than she was prepared to give. She gave what she could. "Because I came from somewhere that taught me what happens when you're not careful," she said. "And because the people I care about, Noah, the people who bring me their bikes, the people in this community, deserve someone who's thought it through, accepted that." He had the quality, she noticed, of someone who knew when a complete answer wasn't coming and respected the limit without resentment. Marcus said, "Ryan, since all of this, trained with him for 4 years, and he's different." "How?" "Quieter," Marcus said, not less confident, something else. "He's thinking before he reacts now, like he's checking himself against something." He paused. "Asked me something 2 days ago. He asked me what I trained for. Not the technical stuff, why. What I actually want to be able to do with it." "Did you tell him?" "I told him I train so that I'm never the reason something gets worse when it could get better," Marcus said. "If I'm in a situation where someone needs help and I have the capability to give it, I'm ready." He paused. "Wrote it down." Emily looked at him. "He wrote it down," Marcus said again, quietly, in a notebook he carries. "I've never seen him write anything down in 4 years." He turned back to the chain. She worked in silence for a moment. "Tell him to come by the garage sometime," she said. "If he wants to understand what mechanical work teaches you about patience." He raised his eyebrows. "You'd teach him?" "I'd give him a dirty job and see how he handles it," Emily said. "That's not the same thing as teaching, but it might be more useful." He almost laughed. "I'll tell him." He left. Emily finished the chain at 8:15. Tested it, then cleaned up her tools and turned off the garage lights for a moment. In the doorway, the same doorway she stood in every evening, looking out where she stood in every evening, and the same darkness at the edge of town, and she thought about the past 3 weeks, about where it had started and where it had arrived. A truck through her fence, a teenage kid on the concrete, folder, and a festival booth, and 63 engines rolling through a September afternoon. And now Marcus Webb telling her that a 24-year-old man had taken out a notebook. He thought about what Daniel Mitchell had said. That's either very wise or very hard. Usually those are the same thing. She thought about the scholarship. Didn't know if Daniel would actually do it. Didn't know if the conversation had gone deep enough in him to produce action rather than just reflection. Not. But she had planted it. She had given him something specific and visible to attach his son's name to. Something that turned a story of damage into a story of investment. He took it was his choice. Most things were, in the end. She locked the garage door. She walked back toward the house through the same dark she always walked through, carrying the same long awareness of the town around her that she always carried, the specific weight of knowing a place well, and watched it from the same spot long enough to understand its rhythms. Valley had watched something over the past 3 weeks. It watched a conflict play out in its streets and its festival and its conversations. And it had formed opinions and taken positions and whispered in its particular small town way. But what it had actually seen, what would stay with people longer than the specific events, was something simpler. It had seen what it looked like when a person didn't flinch, not because they were fearless, not because they had nothing to lose, because they had spent enough years deciding who they were that the decision held under pressure. Went inside. She made tea, She sat at her kitchen table with a notepad, the same paper she always used, the same pen, and she wrote three things on it, the way she always did at the end of something significant. Diary, not a record. Just three things she wanted to remember. She looked at them for a while. Then she folded the paper and put it in the drawer, where she kept the others. More in that drawer than most people would have expected. Chapters, more situations, more missing, more moments where something had been required of her, and she had either given it or learned from not giving it. Valley thought it knew her. Red Valley knew a version of her, the honest version, the daily version, the woman with the garage and the calloused hands and the quiet manner. The version was real. It was her, but it was also the version that had been distilled from everything that came before. The way metal is distilled from ore through heat and pressure, and the removal of what wasn't essential. What remained was what mattered. She drank her tea. Sighed. The town was quiet. Everyone settling into the deep, particular silence of a September night in Montana. Tomorrow morning, she would open the garage at 6:45, and Noah would arrive at 7:15 on his bicycle with the bent kickstand, and Mr. still needed his shovel head back, and there was a waiting list of 2 weeks for new customers and that she was going to have to think about managing. Life had a way of continuing with extraordinary indifference to the dramatic moments embedded in it. Carter had always found that comforting. She rinsed her cup, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed. And somewhere across town, in a house that was quiet in the way that houses get quiet when something has shifted inside them, Mitchell was sitting at a desk with a notebook open and a pen in his hand, writing something that he would not show to anyone for a long time. But that was, for the first time in his memory, genuinely true. The notebook Ryan had been writing in the night after the festival was not a journal in any conventional sense. If he didn't write feelings, he didn't document what had happened. Questions specific, uncomfortable about himself that he'd been avoiding for most of his adult life, and that the past 3 weeks had made impossible to avoid any longer. Question was, what have I actually won? He sat with it for a long time. He had competition medals. He had trophies. He had a record in jiu-jitsu that was genuinely good, the product of real discipline and real work. He had his father's name, which opened doors in 3 counties, reputation as someone not to cross. He wrote down every single one of those things. He wrote one more question underneath. Does any of this make anyone's life better? That question for 45 minutes. Then he closed the notebook and went to bed. But he didn't sleep well, and in the morning the question was still there. The way questions that have finally been articulated have a way of remaining visible after you've looked at them honestly. It's different at the gym now. People had noticed it, not just Marcus, but others. Caleb, his younger training partner who had idolized him, came to him one morning and asked what was different. Still technical, Caleb said. Your game is actually better. I don't know. You seem like you're training for something else. John looked at him. What do you mean? Before, when you were drilling, you were always drilling to win. Listen, Caleb said, you're drilling like you're trying to, I can't explain it, like you're trying to figure something out. Ryan thought about what Marcus had told Emily, which Marcus had relayed back to him afterward. Train so that I'm never the reason something gets worse when it could get better. He had written it in the notebook. He had looked at it 12 times in the past week. Ryan said, that's pretty much what's happening. That's weeks after the festival. The community board of Valley posted a public notice. The Mitchell Family Foundation, a new entity, incorporated the previous week, was establishing an annual scholarship for young people pursuing careers in skilled trades, automotive, repair, electrical work. The inaugural grant was substantial enough that the local paper covered it on the front page, which rarely happened with anything that didn't involve a crime or an election. The scholarship was named the Red Valley Trades Initiative. Ian's name was not in the headline. It was in the second paragraph, as part of the founding family. His father's name was first. Ryan read the article twice when it ran. Then he sent a message to his father that said simply, "Thank you for doing this." He replied with 3 words, "It was your idea, huh?" Ryan stared at his phone for a moment. Then he put it in his pocket and drove to Emily's garage. It was a Monday morning. Noah was at the parts table. Was under a truck, a different customer's vehicle, a domestic pickup that had a transmission issue she'd been chasing for 2 days. She heard Ryan's truck pull up. She recognized the exhaust rattle. She didn't come out immediately. She finished the thought. She was working on a sequence of diagnostic checks that required her to be completely present. And then she slid out from under the truck and wiped her hands and walked to the door and was standing where he always stood when he came here. Now, respectful distance from the entrance, not leaning on anything, not performing confidence or casualness. Just standing. I saw the article, Emily said. He did it, Ryan said, when he actually did it. Did you think he wouldn't? Ryan was quiet for a moment. I wasn't sure. He agrees to things sometimes, and then the practical version of them gets simplified. He paused. This one, he did completely. The way you described it. Scholarship, Emily said. Named publicly. The first recipient is a girl from Garrison, Ryan said. Teen. She wants to be an automotive electrician. He paused. My father's office called her family personally. Nothing. But something in her expression shifted slightly, not dramatic. Just the small movement of a person who has invested something in an outcome and is watching it materialize. Who brought you here? She asked. You told Marcus I could come by, Ryan said. One. You said you'd give me a dirty job and see how I handled it. He looked at him for a long moment. I did say that, Ryan said simply. She held the look for 3 more seconds. You know how to use a wire brush? I know what one is, Ryan said. It's not what I asked. No, Ryan said. I don't really know how to use one. Emily said. At least you're honest about it. She turned back into the garage. Show him where the panhead frame is. Noah looked up from the parts table. He looked at Ryan. Something passed between them, not warmth exactly, not its absence either. The specific neutrality of 2 people who have a complicated shared history and have decided, without discussing it, to let what comes next determine more than what came before. In the back, Noah said. Come on, Ryan followed him. The panhead frame was a 1,952 restoration project that Emily had agreed to take on as a favor for a retired rider in Billings who had owned the bike since 1978 and wanted it brought back to functional condition before he turned 80. He had decades of accumulated corrosion, paint layered over, old paint over original metal, and the wire brushwork required to prepare it for sandblasting was the kind of job that was entirely unglamorous, physically demanding, in a way that had nothing to do with strength and everything to do with patience, and immediately revealing of whether a person was the kind of person who did the work or the kind who performed doing the work. Noah handed Ryan a wire brush and showed him the motion and the pressure required. Went back to his parts table. Ryan started working. He worked for 2 hours without complaining, without stopping to check his phone, without asking when he'd be done, through the point where his forearm burned from the repetition and then past it, finding the rhythm that made the burn manageable, which was what you found when you stayed with something instead of stepping away from it. Point, Emily came by and looked at what he'd done. She didn't compliment it. She pointed to 2 sections where the pressure hadn't been consistent and the prep was uneven. She explained what that would do to the sandblasting. Results if it wasn't corrected. She went back to the truck. Ryan corrected the sections. At noon, Noah brought out 3 sandwiches from the cooler without announcing it. He set one near Ryan on the bench and one near Emily's work area and kept one for himself. He said lunch was happening. It just happened. Ate the sandwich. It was good roast beef on something with mustard, the kind of food that tastes excellent when you've been working. He ate half of it, then looked at Noah across the garage. Can I ask you something, he said. Noah looked up. Did you when I came to your house and apologized? Did you believe me? Noah was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone avoiding the question, but the silence of someone who was going to answer it accurately. I believe that you meant it in that moment, Noah said. And whether it was going to hold, I didn't know. That depends on what you do after, Ryan asked. Noah looked at him for 3 seconds. Here, wire brushing, a 60-year-old frame on a Monday morning when you don't have to be, he said. So yeah, now I believe you. Ryan looked at his sandwich. He said, I know I said it before. I want to say it again now that it's not connected to the legal situation or the settlement or anything else. I'm sorry I put my hands on you. Noah was quiet again. He said, I know. He paused. You want the other half of this? I always make too many. He held up a second sandwich and almost laughed. He didn't quite, but almost. He said thanks. They ate. Emily from the other side of the garage heard the exchange. She didn't say anything about it. And that, she went back to the transmission. But something in the set of her shoulders was different. For the rest of the afternoon, slightly less armored. She went slightly more at ease in the particular way that people who carry responsibility for other people relax when they see that the people they're responsible for are going to be okay. The next twist happened 4 days later, and Emily did not see it coming. Victor Ramirez called on a Friday afternoon. Emily was closing up the garage, and she answered on the second ring because she always answered Victor on the second ring. I need to tell you something, Victor said. I should have told you before the festival because I wanted to see how it played out. Been playing out longer than I expected. And you should know. Stopped what she was doing. She sat on the stool near the workbench. The situation in Red Valley wasn't random, Victor said. Mitchell wasn't just a local kid who drove badly and had bad judgment. His father, Daniel Mitchell, has been in the periphery of a land acquisition project that has been developing for about 18 months. Our investors, some of them connected to interests we have had previous problems with, who have been looking at properties in and around Red Valley. Tertial rezoning, they want certain parcels. Your garage sits on one of those parcels. The property that had been Emily's for 12 years, the workbench and her tools and her waiting list, and the panhead frame in the back, and Noah's bicycle locked to the side fence. She was very still. You're saying the situation with Ryan wasn't isolated, she said. Destiny. I'm saying I don't know if Daniel Mitchell knew, Victor said. He may be clean on this. He's involved in a lot of things, and this may be a part of his portfolio he hasn't looked at closely. He may be central to it. I genuinely don't know. A pause. Is that some of the pressure that landed on you in the past month, the speed at which certain connections responded, the way certain back channels moved was smoother than a kid acting out of arrogance usually produces. Infrastructure underneath it. Not all of it. Ryan's breathed slowly and evenly, the way she had learned to breathe when information arrived that needed to be held carefully before being acted on. How long have you known this? She asked. I had pieces of it before I came to the festival, Victor said. I had the full picture by end of that week. He paused to see what Daniel Mitchell would do after FIP. The scholarship. The meeting with you. Whether his response to the public situation was performance or something genuine, Emily asked. Mixed, Victor said. I think Daniel Mitchell is a man who does business without always knowing everything his business is touching. The land acquisition, Salson, is something that's happening in his portfolio without his full attention. And I think the conversation you had with him at the diner may have been the honest conversation he's had with someone outside his family in years. He paused. But I also think that doesn't make the land situation go away. Emily's jaw tightened. What are they planning? Phase 1 would be rezoning applications, Victor said. They'd need the county board. There are 2 board members who have relationships with Mitchell-adjacent interests. The applications go in cleanly. With the right political groundwork, they could move the process forward before most property owners in the zone even know it's happening. What parcels are in the zone? Victor listed them. His garage was 3rd on the list. She sat with the phone for a moment. Across the garage, the frame of the 100,952 panhead stood half-prepped for sandblasting. The settlement folder from Sandra Chen was filed in her desk drawer. The words she'd written on a notepad were folded in a different drawer. She thought about the clean business record that had frustrated Greg Dalton. The 12 of careful, methodical building that had made everything about the garage bulletproof from the outside. It had not made the property bulletproof because of real estate speculation. It made it bulletproof because that was who she was. But bulletproof against one kind of pressure did not mean bulletproof against all kinds. She said, I need two things from you. Name them. Thing you have on the acquisition project. It did names, entities, person, timeline, river. You've been able to verify. She paused. Pete Alvarez's direct number. I need to make a call that isn't connected to motorcycles. Victor was quiet for just a moment. Pete's number I can give you, he said. Project information, Emily. Some of what I have came from places that I can't put in writing. I don't need it in writing, she said. You need to understand the shape of it. In Red Valley, Tuesday, Victor said. We'll sit down properly, Emily said. She ended the call. She sat alone in the garage for exactly 10 minutes. She did not panic. She did not immediately reach for the phone to call Sandra. Let the full shape of the information settle around her the way she always processed difficult things. From the outside in, letting the largest outlines become clear before focusing on the details. Then she stood up and called Sandra. I have a new situation, she said. Listen to the full account. When Emily finished, Sandra was quiet for 3 seconds, her thinking quiet, the one Emily had learned to distinguish from her surprise quiet. Land acquisition, Sandra said. Rezoning. This is a different category from what we handled before. Do you have any documentation? Not yet. Victor is coming Tuesday. I need you to be available. Clear. Tuesday afternoon, Sandra said. Emily, if this is what it sounds like, the scope of what we're dealing with may be larger than my practice typically handles. You know that too, Emily said. Are you saying you want to bring in someone with more specific experience in land use and municipal law? I'm saying I want to understand the full picture before I decide by what resources to apply, Emily said. Yes. Start thinking about who we'd bring in. Below she hung up. She picked up her phone again and called Pete Alvarez. He answered on the second ring. I've been expecting this call, he said. Victor told you. Victor told me enough, Pete said. I want you to listen to me carefully. What you're describing is something I have seen before in other towns with other properties. It's methodical and it is patient, and it is designed to move slowly enough that people don't see it coming until the rezoning applications are already filed. Runway do we have? 6 weeks, maybe 8, Pete said. That's when the applications would go in, based on what I've been able to track. We want the fall session. After that, the process takes on its own momentum and becomes much harder to stop. 6 weeks, Emily said. 6 weeks, Pete confirmed. There's something you should know that changes this somewhat. Daniel Mitchell is not the lead investor in this project, Pete said. He's secondary. He came into it through a business connection 18 months ago, and his involvement is significant but not central. He paused. The entity is a private investment group out of Denver, the one driving to the timeline and the political groundwork. Daniel Mitchell may not fully understand how far it's gone. Emily thought about the man who had sat across from her at the diner on 3rd Street and said, I failed my son, with the specific quality of someone who was being honest in a way that cost him something. He thought about the envelope he'd put back in his jacket. He thought about the scholarship, the girl from Garrison, the front page of the local paper, saying, Daniel Mitchell might be a leverage point, she said, saying, if he understands what his association with this project means, what it would mean publicly, given the past month in Red Valley, he might make a different choice about his level of involvement, Pete said carefully. He thought about that. It was a risk. If Daniel Mitchell was deeper in the project than Pete believed, if the diner conversation had been performance, as Victor had suggested was possible, then approaching him would signal her awareness of the situation and give them time to accelerate the timeline. Cost her weeks she didn't have. But if he wasn't, man who had sat across from her and said these things was the real version of him, or at least close enough to the real version to act accordingly when shown clearly what was at stake. When she made the decision in about 30 seconds, which was longer than she usually needed. She called Daniel Mitchell's personal number, the one he had given her at the end of the diner conversation, handwritten on his business card, which she had put in her wallet without expecting to use it soon. He answered on the third ring. "Emily Carter," he said, and his voice was not surprised. "You need to meet again," she said. "Soon. How soon?" "Tomorrow," she said. "Same place. A pause. I can be there at noon," she said. She hung up. She looked around the garage at the panhead frame, at Noah's parts table, Electroglide. That had the Electroglide that had been restored with money from Daniel Mitchell's son's settlement, and that stood in the corner with the particular gleam of something that had been through damage and come back better than before. She had built this place carefully and completely. She had spent 12 years making it exactly what it was. He was not going to lose it to a Denver investment group operating through back channels in the Montana county system. She knew about back channels. She knew considerably more about them than they knew about her. Mitchell arrived at that diner at noon the next day with the face of a man who had spent the previous evening thinking about why the call had come and arriving at conclusions he wasn't comfortable with. He sat down. He did not speak first. Emily set a single printed page on the table between them. Victor had sent it. The night before, a summary of the acquisition project, the entities involved, the timeline on the county board relationships. It's not a legal document. It was an overview, but it was specific and it was accurate. And Daniel Mitchell's face, as he read it, confirmed what Pete had suspected. He hadn't known all of it. His jaw tightened as he moved through the page. Twice. When he looked up, his eyes had the flat, focused quality of a man who has discovered that something bearing his name has been moving in directions he didn't authorize. "Did you get this?" he said. "Does that matter right now?" Emily said. He had the page down carefully. "My name is in this," he said. "You're my investment." "Your secondary investment," Emily said. "Through a holding entity in a project led by a Denver group called Meridian Land Partners. The original entry point was a commercial development opportunity that was described to you as mixed-use retail." She paused. "Accurately was the full scope of the rezoning described to you when you came in." Silence. Long enough to be its own answer. "It was presented as a broader development corridor," Daniel said finally. "I was told the rezoning would affect primarily commercial parcels along the highway. It affects residential and small business parcels going back 3 blocks from the highway," Emily said, "including the street." She paused. "Including my property." Daniel stared at her. "You didn't know," Emily said. "It's not a question." She had watched his face, read the page. "Not the full scope," he said. His voice had something in it she had heard once before, the tone of a man sitting with accountability in real time, trying to decide what to do with it. "When did you find out?" "Yesterday," she said. "And your first call was to me." "Second call," she said. "My first call was to my attorney. My second was to you." He looked at her for a long moment. "Why?" "Because if the man who sat across from me in this diner last week was real," Emily said, "then he deserves the chance to make a choice that's consistent with who he told me he was trying to be." She paused. "And because the alternative, going to the county board directly, going to the press, making this public, accelerates everything into a conflict that is bad for this, regardless of who wins it." Daniel picked up the page again. He looked at it, but he wasn't reading it anymore. Thinking. "Meridian," he said. "They've been moving faster than the original schedule. Vacations go in 6 weeks," Emily said. "Maybe less. You need to talk to my attorneys," he said. "Yes," Emily said. "Before you do, I need to know something, not legally. Just as the person sitting across from me right now." She held his gaze. "You in or are you out?" The question sat between them. Daniel Mitchell was 63 years old. He had built something real. Over 30 years. And he was being honest with himself. Sitting in this diner that was new and not comfortable, allowed things to happen in the periphery of what he'd built that didn't match the person he believed himself to be. His son had been a mirror of that in a way he hadn't understood until recently. Arrogance and entitlement and casual assumption that the rules bent around him, those things had a source. Was sitting at a table in a diner. In Red Valley, having an honest conversation with a woman whose property his investment was quietly working to absorb. Daniel Mitchell said. One word. But the way he said it had weight. Performance, not strategy. The specific, irreversible quality of a decision made by someone who understands exactly what it costs. I'll have my attorneys begin withdrawal proceedings from the partnership today, he said. Slow the timeline. Significantly. I hold enough that my exit restructures their financing. And I'll make calls to the two board members. He paused. We won't be able to stop the project entirely. Meridian will find other investors. I can slow it enough that it becomes visible. And once it's visible, this community can respond to it on its own terms, Emily said. Daniel said. He folded the page and put it in his jacket. Emily. He looked at Miss with an expression that was the most unguarded she had ever seen from him. Daniel Mitchell was not a weak man, and she didn't mistake vulnerability for weakness. Genuinely open. You knew I'd say out, he said. I thought there was a good chance, Emily said. Because of the scholarship, Emily said. Because of Tuesday. She paused. Because people who are only performing goodness don't sit in diners and say, I failed my son. They say the right things in the right rooms. What you said last week was not said for an audience. Daniel absorbed that. My son wants to meet with you again, he said. Not about the situation. He wants to talk about what you said, about what strength is for. He paused. He's been different since the festival. I don't know how to describe it exactly, except that he's asking questions he never asked before. Tell him to come by the garage, Emily said. Any Monday morning. Daniel nodded. He left. Emily sat with her coffee until it was gone. He thought about the next 6 weeks. The calls Sandra would make, the board members Daniel would call, the public process that would begin once the project became visible. It's not going to be clean or simple. Meridian Land Partners was not going to disappear because one secondary investor withdrew. There'd be more meetings, more documentation, more of the patience as strategy that had defined the past month. But the shape of it was different now. The thing that had been operating in the dark had been brought into the light, and things in the light were subject to forces that things in the dark were not. Drove back to the garage. Ryan was already there. It's not supposed to be. It was Saturday, not Monday. But he was standing outside with a paper bag that turned out to contain sandwiches, because apparently that was something he had observed and decided to adopt without announcing it, which was either presumptuous or exactly right, depending on how you looked at it. Lily looked at it for a moment. Then she unlocked the garage and went in. Scheduled, she said. I know, Ryan said. Question I needed to ask in person. She turned. He held her gaze. The scholarship, he said. Hello from Garrison. She wants to be an automotive electrician, the article. Emily said. I want to offer her an apprenticeship, Ryan said. If you're willing. He paused. She'd need a place to actually learn the work, not just the financial support. And you're the best person I know of who could teach it. Studied him. 17-year-old girl from Garrison who wanted to do what Emily did. Gotten a scholarship with Ryan Mitchell's family name on it. Needed not just money, but a place to stand and learn and become someone who knew their craft. The full circle of it was not lost on Emily. Bring me her contact information, Emily said. Reach out to her directly. Ryan exhaled. Just once, controlled, but she heard the relief in it, he said. She picked up a wrench. She held it out to him. Head frame, she said. You didn't finish the left side. He took the wrench. He went to work. Months passed away. Months pass in small towns visibly, in the changes that accumulate slowly until you notice them all at once. Land Partners Project became public in late October. When a county board member, one of the two Daniel had called, submitted a public disclosure and recusal, triggered a review process that pushed the rezoning applications past the fall session. The group found partial replacement investors, but the timeline stretched into the following year. And by then the community had organized. Chen had connected with land use attorneys from Billings. The project was facing opposition from 12 property owners in the it formed zone, a collective response. His garage was not lost. The girl from Garrison, her name was Danny. She was 17 and fierce, and asked Ed better questions than most adults. Emily had trained started on the first Monday of November, before 7, which told Emily everything she needed to know about whether this was going to work. Danny had rebuilt her first carburetor from scratch and could diagnose electrical faults in under 12 minutes, which was faster than Noah had learned, and almost as fast as Emily had expected. By 51, had turned 17, renewed his commitment to continue through high school graduation and submitted an application to a technical college in Billings. With Emily's letter of recommendation, the most honest letter she had ever written, which said exactly who he was, without exaggeration or decoration, and which was accepted in March, came to the garage most Monday mornings. He did not receive lessons in the conventional sense. Received work, unglamorous, technically demanding, usually more complex, as Emily decided, without announcing it, that he had earned the next level of difficulty. He was not naturally skilled with his hands the way Noah was, or the way Danny was shaping up to be. He was patient in a way he had not been before, and patient mattered more than naturally skilled, as Emily had told both Noah and Danny at separate times and for separate reasons. One morning in late February, Marcus came with him. Marcus had been to the garage before. He stood near the entrance, looking at the organization of the space, the tools in their proper positions, the bikes in various states of work, the order that was not tidiness, but function, and he said, "You finally understand why he comes here." Lee looked at him. "What do you understand?" "This is the same thing," Marcus said, "doing here. Building something correctly, piece by piece, until it holds weight." He paused. He's been trying to figure out how to train with that intention. He's actually practicing it. Emily considered that. "You want to do the other side of the panhead frame?" Just looked down at his hands. He was wearing good clothes, he said. "You'll learn something," Emily said. He ruined the clothes. He learned something. In March, it's on a Thursday afternoon, when the garage was quiet and the light was the particular quality of early spring in Montana, thin and bright and carrying the first real warmth of the year. Ryan sat on the overturned crate near the workbench where Noah usually sat, and he asked Emily a question he had been building toward for months. "Did you know," he said, "from the beginning, and day in the garage, did you know that it was going to turn out like this?" Stopped what she was doing. She gave the question the attention it deserved. She said, "What did you know?" "I knew what I was," she said, "and I knew what you were in that moment. And I knew that those two things were going to produce a situation that required me to hold my ground without losing myself." She set down her tool. "You were going to find your way to something different. I didn't know that. It's yours to find." Ryan was quiet. "Why did you tell me to come to the festival?" he asked. "Everything. Why invite me?" "Because you knocked on Noah's door," Emily said, "before you had any reason to think it would help you. You did it because it was the right thing, and you were finally thinking in those terms." She looked at him. "You don't close the door on someone when they're learning to open theirs." Looked at his hands, calloused now, in ways they hadn't been before. The particular calluses that come from working with metal and tools rather than from training. "Something in the notebook," he said, "back in September, after the festival." "You don't have to show me," Emily said. "You want to," he said. He pulled the notebook from his jacket pocket. To the first page, he read aloud, "Not performing. Just reading the way you read something that is true. It's my strength actually for. Not what does it protect me from." He closed the notebook. Quiet around them. The specific late afternoon. Quiet of a place where work happened and people came to learn things about themselves through the discipline of working on things that required precision and care. "It's the right question," Emily said. "I know," Ryan said. "I'm still answering it." "Good," Emily said. She picked up her tool. "That's the honest answer. Keep going." She went back to work. Ryan sat on the crate for a while longer. Then, watching her work, and the afternoon moved around them. He went outside of the town of Red Valley, continued. "It's ordinary. Its ordinary rhythms, people and business and seasons, and the accumulation of small decisions that build over time into the shape of a life. Of Emily Carter and Ryan Mitchell became one of those stories that towns carry in their collective memory, not because it was dramatic in the ways that famous stories are dramatic, but because it was true in the ways that matter to people who have to live with each other across years and seasons and the inevitable complications of shared community. People talked about the festival for a long time. They talked about the bikes rolling in and the silence that fell over the crowd, and Victor Ramirez walking directly to Emily's booth like a man walking to someone he trusted completely. But what people remembered longest, what they came back to in conversations years later, was the simpler part before the festival. The part where a woman had stood in front of someone with every advantage and had said quietly, with total conviction, walk it while you still have the chance, and had meant it as an offer, not a threat, and had kept her word regardless of which choice he made. Because that was who Emily Carter was, not someone who waited for others to recognize her worth before she claimed it. Not someone who needed the validation of a crowd or the arrival of 63 motorcycles to know exactly where she stood. She'd always known. She had simply given others the time to figure it out. Finally did when Ryan Mitchell stood on a porch with his hands at his sides and said the true thing. When Daniel Mitchell sat in a diner and set out with the weight of a real decision. When a 17-year-old girl, Garrison, arrived before 7 on a November morning ready to learn, Emily Carter received it the way she received all things, with exactness, without ceremony, and with the profound, unshakable steadiness of someone who had built something real and had always known it was real, regardless of whether anyone else in the room understood that what they were standing next to. Respect is never demanded. It is built day by day, decision by decision, in the unglamorous work of showing up for people when showing up costs something, until the day comes when it speaks entirely for itself. And on that day, the quietest person in the room is already standing on the strongest ground.